Hello and welcome to Deep Impact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Arbo's most Canadian work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Void 7.4. Blake's back, baby. And he wakes up to find Rose and Corvidae standing there smiling at him while Ty and Tiffany have bled themselves on the floor to bring him back.
I can't believe I've spent over an arc just saying Blake needs to stop using his friends and just drain them and leave them somewhere safe. And now it's finally happened and I don't like it.
Yeah.
This is classic Wild Bow shenanigans.
Yeah.
I spend ages rooting for something and then it happens and I'm like, oh no, that was terrible.
Yeah, I think the fact that blood is involved makes it worse. I don't know. Yeah, I prefer Blake kind of passively drawing energy rather than vampiring them and they get knocked out.
So I think for me, it's how it went down. I think I would have been fine with this if, it is still a bit gruesome, a bit grim, but if it had been Blake says, hey, you could do this, and they sort of knowingly consent and drain themselves, and Blake was involved and walked them through it, it's kind of all okay. But the fact that it was happening, because they felt that it was that dire, and we'll get into the whole where Rose is at argument later in this chapter, I think, but because Rose was the one directing it, it just feels a bit skeevier to me. Yeah, I guess because Blake wasn't around to kind of, verify that they were really cool with this.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's just weird. I mean, it works, so, I guess it was the right thing to do. Yeah, also, I remember at the end of last chapter, you were like, oh, wait, is Rose out because Corvidae is next to her? But no, Corvidae is just in the mirror, which is interesting because it's he doesn't have mirror-based powers. We knew Bloody Mary was in there because she's the fucking mirror demon or whatever. But Corvidae, as far as we know, doesn't have anything to do with mirrors. So is it does he just have this power, or is Rose able to just pull her servants into the mirror dimension now? Is she stronger? I don't know. It's a weird... It feels like it's a hint towards something.
Yeah, it definitely does, because it's not just Corvidae, but later on, the oily monster, who I'll be referring to as Hexus, also jumps out of a mirror and kills whatever the fuck that thing was. So yeah, it does feel like she's either got some sort of ability to help them all, or she coincidentally just got a bunch of monsters that can do that anyway, which seems a bit unlikely, but I don't know.
Well, she was kind of looking for ones that thematically fit with her, which is how she got Bloody Mary. So maybe there is she just Google searched mirror and this is what came up. But I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, things get worse. The blood, wasn't enough to bring Blake back by itself. So Blake also had candles poured into his wounds to help heal him. Also, it turns out Fel is confirmed as dead, kind of.
Yeah. So it's hard not to read into this that it's we've spent the last few chapters talking about how Blake is becoming more ruthless and sort of a bit less, or a bit more heartless, and stuff. And now parts of him are literally being turned into wax, or he's literally, parts of him are literally now made out of wax that.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like an accident.
He is losing his humanity a bit here, I suppose. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, because he was so fucked up that he had to be brought back in 2 ways, which I love. Although it seems to have... He actually seems to be in the best spot he's been in for a while. He actually seems like, oh shit, I actually feel pretty good. I don't know.
Well, something that he kind of skims over later in the chapter is obviously as they run up the stairs to check on Laird towards the end of the chapter, he outruns Maggie, Rose, and the Tallow Man, taking 2 steps at a time, which is not something he's been able to do for about 2.5 arcs.
2 arcs, 3 arcs. He basically had to power walk his way away from the abyssal, the erasure demon before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's I guess I'd argue that fixing yourself by converting a huge percentage of your body to wax is kind of like curing your wounds with glamour, but whatever it takes, I guess. Beggars can't be choosers.
One other fun little cute bit is Rose got Evan to go to sleep by convincing them that it might help Blake get better sleep, which is just a cute little lie. I love it.
I also love that he can sleep. It just turns out he doesn't really have to, and so because this isn't the first time that we've heard that Evan was like just being real irritating.
Yeah.
And so I love it. It's such an 8-year-old thing that he would never want to go to bed. But so does this mean Evan in the dream world, like when Blake was in the dream world at the end of last chapter? I'm just going to assume that was the actual Evan, like in the dream with him. Like until it's proven otherwise. I really like that idea, so I'm going to hold on to it.
Yeah, no, I like it too. The idea of Evan that being, because Evan was obviously asleep at the same time. I kind of hadn't clicked for me, but I quite like it. Although, does that mean that Evan is just hanging out with Mrs. Lewis now inside the dream? Blake's woken up and Evan and Mrs. Lewis are just chilling there together.
Oh god, that's a horrible thought.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Fel is dead, kind of, mostly dead. Short of a Miracle Max, he's gone.
Yeah. Man, that's a bummer. He's not gone. Which makes me think we might see him again.
Yeah.
I actually was also thinking, I've predicted that Blake might die at some point, and just the image of Blake like waking up in whatever afterlife he ends up in, and the first thing he sees is Fel. It's just such a hilarious idea that like even if Fel is dead, I could totally see that happening, and it'd be fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. So of course things are still getting worse here. Conquest has used the 3 days that he's got to basically ground the city to a halt. There's storms, there's snow, there's power outages. All the human population are inside, and that means basically others and all kinds of monstrous shit is roaming the streets at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, this brings me back to my whole "is Blake the baddie" rant I went on half an hour ago or so. And I mean, obviously, we've talked about how keeping Conquest away from the Diabolists is probably like the right call, even with all of this going on. But it certainly feels like we've taken a pretty messy route to end up where we are, considering it's still looking pretty good that Conquest ends up with the Diabolists anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he's still kind of in the winning position, right? Yeah. He has been basically winning ground for the past 3 days, despite the fact that he's not able to directly do anything.
Yeah, well, it's like what Miss Lewis said in the dream world. Conquest has really turned the tables, and Blake needs to strike now. Apparently, he's really taken her word on that.
Yeah. I want to touch on how Rose said no to getting Fel's soul back. Right. Obviously it's not as simple as just, hey, say yes to this and Fel comes back to life. There's obviously a lot of complications there, but I do think it's not beyond the realm of possibility that they could have done something to help Fel here. It does feel a bit cold.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of have to agree with Rose's logic here, and I mean it's convincing enough to even make Blake not argue with her. So it must be pretty good. But this idea that they just give them Fel's soul and they wouldn't have a way of containing it, so it would just disappear, is very believable. Well,
yeah, but you can set up terms like if they make an arrangement that's like, oh, you give us Fel in a state that means we can bring him back. You can kind of make these deals, right?
Yeah, that's true.
This is a world where you can force people to play by rules that you establish in deals. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was right. I'm sure there would have been tricks and catches to any deal they made. Just does feel like not even gonna consider the option to save his life.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know. Fel died fighting Conquest. That's honestly not the worst way for him to go. Yeah,
that's how he wanted to go, I think. So Blake and Rose are talking about good plans and bad plans and whether they have any plans. And also there's this bit where they kind of pick up that there's a discrepancy in their history. So in Rose's history, she says she was named as the first heir. Molly wasn't named as the heir.
Yeah, which my immediate thought on this, Blake pings onto it as somewhat important as well, and he doesn't let himself dwell on why. He accepts that Rose doesn't want to talk about it, and he's got bigger fish to fry at the moment, basically. But I was immediately like, well, so what is she does she just have a missing 4 months then? If she was named the heir, then would she have 4 months of memories of being the heir or not? That really doesn't add up. There's something more going on here.
Yes. And so I didn't really pick up on this inconsistency. It didn't seem strange to me. But then I was like, yeah, you're right. And then I went back and I pulled a quote from 1.2. And when Blake and Rose are driving in the car to Hillsglade House, Blake asks, "How do your memories line up? Molly got picked, but you were at the house?" And Rose says, "I was home with Mum and Dad. They're mad, obviously, because I didn't get Hillsglade House, and they thought it was as close to a given as you could get. Mad at me, especially." So something's going on here. Like, she's either... Yeah, I mean, I guess she can't lie now, so she was lying then?
Unless she lied about not being able to lie, which... I mean, well, now I'm getting, like, tinfoily.
Now we're getting tinfoiling.
I mean, like, that would be a very good lie to make. Like, if you were able to convince Blake that you couldn't lie and you were careful enough about how you lied to keep him believing that, like, that's... it's a very good strategy for helping him to trust you. So, I mean, that could be it. But I'm more inclined to believe that maybe she was lying back here.
But why would she lie? What's the motivation?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about how I think she knew more about the situation and had more contact indirectly with Granny Rose. And now I guess I've got a 4-month window at which to claim that she did all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Anyway, so as they're heading out, Rose explains she summoned a few more not demons, including Corvidae, obviously, who has basically done his thing to turn the Sisters of the Torch and the Astrologer against each other by getting the Sisters like flame elemental to attach itself inside one of the Astrologer's devices that she obviously wants to hold on to. Now they're kind of fighting internally.
Yeah, and Blake's kind of annoyed at this because they're the two groups he reckoned he had the best chance of, like, turning or not being outright antagonistic towards. But he, quote, bites his tongue since he's not trying to be like Rose was after her multi-day nap, because obviously she just woke up and was like, "Why did you do this? Why did you do that? That was stupid. This was stupid." And Blake didn't really appreciate that. So at least he has the insight to not just immediately call everything she did into question because it irritated him when she did that.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if Blake is right to be annoyed about this, honestly. Like, this is a good play. Rose did a nice, non-lethal, non-combative way that basically took two of Conquest's champions out. Like, completely, right? And Blake's pissed off about it. Because he was because he thought he could turn his enemies against him, which he kind of tried and wasn't able to do. Like, this was probably the best and least amount of collateral and least amount of, like, fallout option that any of them have ever taken throughout the entire story, and Blake is pissed off about it.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that's probably because Corvidae was involved, and he has
totally.
serious issues with Corvidae that are made clear throughout this chapter. But I'm beginning to think it's becoming a bit fair to say that Blake is a bit of a control freak when it comes to a lot of this Cabal stuff. Like, he was already sort of giving off vibes like that before his 3-day nap, and there's very much a sense of he doesn't really approve of much of anything that went down while he was asleep. Yeah. And I mean, often there's some valid reasons for that, but it does sort of feel like a lot of the time it comes down to the fact that he didn't get to have a say in it, and so he just doesn't like it.
Totally.
I don't know.
I get that vibe too, which maybe, I don't know, maybe we're being harsh on Blake here, because there's a lot of context to this, but still, this feels like a pointless thing to be pissed off by.
As I said, I think there are usually decent reasons for him to be uncomfortable with most of these things, but it just, even before he was asleep, there was some moments where it just sort of felt like he really did feel like the leader, and he didn't like it when people weren't consulting him, and that does seem to be, that is a little vibe I'm getting here. Anyway, I just wanted to put up this one line where Evan is like, "Oh, Blake, you're awake," and Blake says, "Thanks to my friends," and Rose sort of coughs. And Blake responds, "I'm counting you among them. Don't be silly." And this, like, genuinely takes Rose aback.
Yes,
like,
in the text,
like, what the hell?
Italicized. She seemed genuinely taken aback by that, as opposed to all the other things that she does, huh, Blake?
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought of that. But I mean, I've read this like 10 times now, and it's still fucking
It's
hilarious.
very funny,
like,
yeah.
I was just like, oh, Rose, like, oh, Blake, like,
Yeah.
both of you, like, of course, Blake is confused that Rose doesn't think that they're friends, and of course, Rose doesn't think that they're friends. Like, Blake has done a lot of bad shit to her. But and there's more to this that he kind of goes into later, and I guess we will as well.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. The theme of Blake seeing Rose and Maggie as his friends, even though he feels like he can't trust them, is very, I don't know. It's an interesting one, this chapter.
Yeah.
So Rose and Blake are kind of going to find Maggie next, and they kind of disagree whether or not going after Conquest straight away once they team up with her is a good idea, which obviously is what Mrs. Lewis told Blake to do.
Yeah, and I mean, Blake hasn't really been forthcoming with Rose about that. So I think it's a little fair for her to just be like, what, you just want to charge in? Wait, that's fucking dumb. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this argument is fair given that Blake is not sharing all the information he has.
Yeah, true. It feels like we're getting to the point of the story where everyone's starting to keep a lot of secrets from each other, right?
Yeah, well, there's trust issues going around that lead to people,
they're really going around
keeping secrets, which of course leads to more trust issues.
Yeah, so Blake's starting to get really paranoid about Rose, because obviously Blake knows now that Rose seemed to know about the place switching stuff and told Conquest.
So yeah, and we've already touched on some of this, but I think the bit that really stood out to me during this whole internal freakout is he really thinks back to, arcs 2 and 3. He doesn't think of it in that terms, but that's the time he's thinking of. That Rose was almost trying to hate him, and he was making it hard. And I kind of think this tracks. Like, I think I even, spewed some nonsense about that back at the time. Like when I was saying that Rose was meant to replace Blake, although I think I was talking of it more of a merger back then, but it did sort of feel like she didn't like the moments when Blake was being kind to her, and I speculated that maybe it had something to do with her not wanting to feel attached to him. And, I guess Blake is now wondering that as well, and I guess we'll see.
Yeah, he seems to be really going down that train of thought, right? He thinks to himself at one point, Rose was stronger. I wasn't so sure I could stop her if she decided to send her monsters after me. Which basically means Blake is already starting to think about contingency plans for what happens if or when Rose betrays him.
Yeah, and he follows this up by mentioning that he wasn't lying when he said he considers Rose a friend.
Yeah.
And so I think this is really saying a bit more about Blake than it is about Rose. Because, we know Blake has issues forming intimate, connections or relationships with people. Mostly, I think a lot of the focus there, at least for us, has been, on physical relationships. But, in the dream chapter, also in the dream sequence last chapter, he did sort of mention how he doesn't want to, he wants to be a bit of a hermit, and go out and see his friends every now and then, but largely he's happiest on his own. And, I think this sort of tracks with that to me. He does consider Rose and Maggie friends, but he also doesn't trust them because he just sort of has trust issues, I guess. So I think this is really saying more about Blake than it is about Rose.
Yeah, that's true. I think the last bastion of Blake's connection with Rose is that she shackled herself to Conquest to kind of prevent Blake from that. And this is the thing that Blake comes back to, is like, okay, this is the piece of evidence that means that she's actually on side.
Yeah, and because he goes through this, and then he actually turns back to some reasons she might be against him, and then he sort of has to swing back and be like, no, she changed herself up, I have to hold on to this, which I'm not saying, 100% believe this or anything, but you could take the grim argument that it was self-serving, because right after she did it, she sort of said to Blake, I could see from the look on your face you were never going to do it. And so, if she knew she was going to replace Blake, then, she would have known that wasn't going to go well for her if he wasn't going to do it. So, there's that part of you that's like, well, was she just reading the room?
I mean, maybe. I don't know.
I'm just sort of being a bit of a lawyer's
pessimist's
advocate.
Yeah. So they're on their way to meet up with Maggie, and they pass by some others that are out on the street, and Rose basically full on, like, SEAL Team 6 takes them down by sicking these, all the others that she's kind of built up on them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of validated Blake's concerns a little bit. Like, she's really fucking ruthless and efficient and brutal and, I mean, also badass. Like, let's be honest, it was pretty cool.
She full on, takes them all down very easily.
But I was definitely like, okay, I can see why Blake's a little bit afraid of her now. She's pretty fucking hardcore. Like, this was insane.
Yeah. I don't know. But Blake obviously takes this and thinks, oh yeah, she's gonna fuck me up. Or she could easily fuck me up, which, yeah, I get it, Blake, but I don't know. She's, as far as we know, she's never actually acted against you, Blake. So, I don't know. Cut her some slack.
Yeah.
They reach Rose's evidence that things have gotten worse and that they can't go after Conquest right now. And it's basically Conquest warping Toronto around his tower.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know he's a movie fan from that weird... I've forgotten what movie it was referencing.
Challenging death to, a contest.
So I guess we can add Inception to Conquest's list of all-time greats.
I love the description of it looking like Conquest's tower is a fork that's twirling up the spaghetti of Toronto. So this is Rose's evidence. I don't know, like, and this to Rose indicates, hey, maybe Conquest isn't actually just as much of a facade as we thought he was. I get this means he's strong, but, like, there's no other play here, I don't think. Like, other people are going to get fucked up. If they do nothing, Conquest is going to get stronger and kind of consolidate his power, and, they're just going to slowly lose assets one by one. I don't think there's any other possible option.
Yeah, but again, we're sitting with this knowledge that that's what Miss Lewis said, and Rose doesn't really have that.
Sure.
But no, I get what you're saying, but then also, like, if somebody went and told me to fight like a 10-foot grizzly bear in hand-to-hand combat, with the reasoning being that in a year it's going to be a 14-foot grizzly bear, I still wouldn't want to fight it, like, just because the odds are going to get worse, this doesn't mean the odds are good.
Yeah.
And I could see Rose's inclination towards trying to wait it out and come up with some left field solution. Like, I think that's essentially her plan.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose. That feels like a very Rose plan, but I don't know. I mean, they've lost Fell, and yes, Rose has kind of struck some blows to some of the other champions, and Laird is, for now, locked up. But it does feel like they're just gonna slowly keep losing. Regardless of what Mrs. Lewis said, like, Conquest just has the resources,
Yeah, I mean, I guess Rose is hoping that she can find some summon or get Blake to loosen the rules so that she can summon something that will make a difference. Like, I guess you got to keep in mind that from Rose's perspective, she knows they're sitting on stuff that they just don't want to use.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Maybe her plan is to let things keep getting worse until Blake just breaks his moral code and just summons some really horrible shit to take care of it.
Yeah, I mean, could be.
Anyway, so Blake and Rose eventually arrive, and Maggie's caught in a fight with a few wraiths, and Rose, quickly and cleanly takes care of it. Unfortunately, in the scuffle, Maggie thinks she might have let something through, which is probably up with Laird right now.
And so my favorite bit of this is that, like, Rose's minions come in and just fucking literally destroy two of the wraith. The third one's taken care of by JP, who just goes and has a quick chat with it, and it fires off with a purpose.
Yeah.
Which is just, like, it's so creepy.
Who knows where the fuck it's going? Yeah.
It's even worse than the idea of just them being completely obliterated. And, like, I think Blake shudders when he sees Corvidae do this, and I was just sort of like, I was on the same page. I was like, that's somehow much more terrifying. And then also Maggie has the hyena now, which does not impress Blake or Evan.
Yeah, that's pretty grim, right? I mean, Blake even has the thought of, like, oh, this is why she made Evan go to sleep, so that she had the opportunity to do this, which is really, I mean, that's like a serious level of manipulation if it's true.
It's definitely putting a lot of, like, intentionality behind Rose's manipulations.
Yeah.
It's a very grim outlook.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to call out from this section is so they sort of talk about how hectic the fighting was that Maggie was doing. After they've sort of saved her. I'm not complaining, Maggie said. She flashed a smile, and there was blood in the spaces between her teeth. She'd been hit. It was disconcerting for her to be, excited, while I was feeling so grim about this, so guilty. And just, this really reminds me of exactly what Eamon was saying about Rose Sr. in the end of his Histories interlude. Like, as she was capturing Barbatorum, like how terrified he was that she looked energized and excited by offering her firstborn to a demon.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know exactly what I want to do with that comparison, but I'm filing it away. Like, Maggie seems right at home in some of this.
Yeah, in her element.
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I've always said how much I love Maggie and her whole energy, but I'm starting to wonder if Rose is really the one Blake needs to be worried about.
Yeah. So they run up to check on Laird, and he is free.
Yep, and he's pretty impressed with himself about it. So
oh my god, Laird, you can't ever not be smug, can you? He could have had the chance to get away completely without them knowing, but he waited around just so he could see their face as he escaped. Like, Laird, you're a fucking psycho. So he also lets Pose free with this kind of implicit understanding between them that Poos is going to turn on them. And Poos runs at them and just immediately gets put back in his book. It's like such a satisfying failure, which I think indicates Rose is like really getting good at this kind of stuff. She's really like, the Midge binding, whatever, failed, or had some tricks in it, but Rose has been really on point most of this time with a lot of this stuff.
I mean, so far she's got like a whole crew of underlings that seem to be working out really well. So I agree. Although I did get a bit confused by this because obviously, like, the whole point of Pose coming out of the book originally was he knew the terms of the arrangement, and so like, wouldn't he have known that this was coming? I was a bit confused. Like, I wasn't sure if he was playing along at first.
My theory is that it's that they set up this circle and they set up a bit where, if he gets out of this, he's going to go back into book form. And then he just kind of let him inside without letting him know about the other stuff. Although you're right, maybe he would have known. Maybe it was just a Pose ploy.
I don't know. Like, it could have been in the rules that he had to play along. I don't know. Like, I would have thought he would be aware of what the rules were and that he was breaking them.
Yeah. Anyway, Laird escapes. He does a little time management trick to disappear. And Rose seems bummed out for a bit, but Blake's like, "Ooh, no, this might be the perfect opportunity to test my theory on the Behaims. So, Elliot, we've given you some time to think about it. What is the Behaim theory?"
Yeah, I was actually going to say, didn't we already have this cliffhanger? Like, I feel like this is how 612 ended. But I guess that just means I've had more time to think about it, so it's even more embarrassing when I'm completely wrong. So, I think, like, I don't know. I've had a bunch of thoughts on this that I've moved on from, but I'm just going to go through them anyway. So my first thought, like, back in the day, was that Blake had some idea of where the power might be being stored, because obviously the big thing we know about chronomancers, or at least the Behaims, is that they all like constantly pay this tribute and form like a well of power. Like, they, so they have like a dam somewhere of power that they keep a tight lid on. And so my first thought was that maybe Blake knew where it was and more who. I was wondering if maybe, like, Laird / Eamon / whoever the current head is like the keeper of the power. But I don't really know what he'd be able to do with that, especially since he just lost Laird. So that idea kind of got quashed by this chapter. So then I think the next thing I latched onto was the idea that he still has the Stonehenge bracelet. Like, it was last mentioned in 7.1, but the one he took from Duncan. I wonder if that's going to let him access the Behaim's power. And I don't think he's going to be able to use it. Like, I think there's probably more protections in place. I don't know, maybe JP can fix that, but he wouldn't just be able to be like to use it because he's got the Stonehenge. But I mean, he's got Pose sitting here, and I wonder if he wants to poison the well, so to speak. or maybe let it out. Like, because I guess the other thing we've heard about chronomancers is if you stuff it up, there's fucking massive consequences, right? So, could be interesting if Blake somehow manages to force the dam open and like all the Behaims just suddenly explode,
or turn into skeletons or babies or something.
I mean, he doesn't really want to kill them, so
Yeah.
I don't know that he'd be happy if that happened, but like I could imagine just weird cracks in time forming around them. Like maybe this is a good thing because he's hoping Laird will go back to Conquest, and Conquest might get caught up in whatever weird shit happens when Laird just spontaneously emits some random time field. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess we'll see.
Well, I guess we'll see. That's the end of our discussion on Void 7.4, though. Almost, because it's time for us to talk about our discussion question that we asked, 2 chapters ago?
Yes.
That question was, practitioning is such a flexible and varied profession. What are some cool ideas for practitioner specialties we don't see in Pact? Yeah. There are a lot of cool answers to this. I think I'm going to pull out the first one here, which is Brawl97, who was talking about possessions, and kind of mentioned Vic, who obviously back in interlude 1, 2?
2, the first one in Arc 2.
Yeah. Back in Arc 2 was using possession to get strength to play good football and got in too deep.
Yeah.
But the idea of possessing a lot of different things in order to kind of gain their powers. Brawl97 gave the example of murdering a shark and being kind of absorbing its ghost a bit. And this gives you, teeth regeneration powers and blood sniffing powers, right?
Yeah, well, I think Brawl97 mentioned they just had their wisdom teeth out, so they really liked the idea of regenerative teeth at the moment.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I had that done a few years ago, and I get that.
Yeah.
I like this idea, because Brawl97 actually brings up that there's a lot of like historical lore around, consuming things to get their power.
Yeah.
In various sort of cultures. So like I do really like this sort of concept of being a practitioner who specializes in, I guess, borrowing the powers of other spirits through consumption or other means. It is pretty cool.
Yes. Actually, a user called Hyperly Passive pointed out that this exists in Pact Dice. There's a class, I don't know, called the Host class, who's all about being inhabited by different weaker spirits that, give you buffs of teeth regeneration or whatever it is. Yeah.
God, I can't wait to get into Pact Dice the second we finish this story. I'm so keen. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool world building in the, the supporting documents for this stuff. Yeah. A user called Beard of Valor talked about kind of taking something like a gem and doing a lot of rituals with it over a long period of time to kind of put power into it, the same way you might put power into your domain or something. And then kind of taking this gem and fashioning it into a ring or a bracelet, and you end up with these kind of powerful objects that you can then kind of sell off to other practitioners that just want to buy instead of having to, awaken some friends, they just buy a special ring from Beard of Valor and use that as a power source or have some kind of powers applied to it.
Yeah, well, I really liked, Beard of Valor wrote a bunch about, walking through this really intricate example case of a ring with a gem in it, and sort of talking about, all the things you can do to the metal and the gem to kind of improve the symbolism of them. So, purifying some of the metals to enhance, the ability of the gold in it and the symbolism there, which I really like, and how it fits into this sort of more methodical and calm approach to practicing than we get to see in Blake's life. Taking raw elements and kind of really focusing, it's kind of like a very artistic approach to practicing. Because the example that Beard of Valor gave sort of took all these different approaches to improve the power of the object. It was really about thinking of multiple different symbologies and all that sort of stuff to really enhance it in multiple ways. I just thought it was a really cool idea.
Yeah, I especially like how it kind of reminds me of rogues from Parahumans, right? Where you're kind of in this life, but you don't pick a kind of combative lifestyle. You're picking a way to kind of use the knowledge that you gain, but in a way that's for your own benefit or for kind of humanity's benefit rather than just fucking fight things. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, again, Hyperly Passive points out that this resembles a class from Pact Dice, the Enchanter class. We really need to get into this stuff.
Would that I could. Soon.
Yeah. What else? I want to pull out one by Kipos21, who talks about a practitioner who's kind of like a vampire, I guess, for want of a better word. It basically goes around draining power from people by force or without them knowing, in order to sustain themselves. Basically, the evil version of Blake taking power from his cabal.
I mean, yeah, it kind of strikes me as a hybrid of the two we've already talked about, in a way.
Yeah, I like we obviously saw some blood magic with Tiff and Ty this chapter. I really think it would be cool to see a practitioner who goes around, I mean, not cool, horrible, but interesting, to see a practitioner who goes around like draining people and kind of forcibly taking power from them, which would probably have some really heavy karmic backlash, but I imagine could be quite an interesting way to give yourself kind of temporary power boosts.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a very dark kind of magic, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the word Kipos21 uses is like as a, kind of a form of necromancy almost,
Yes.
and I think necromancy doesn't invoke good imagery, and I think that's fair for this idea. It's definitely a darker take.
Yeah,
not that that's a bad thing. I still
yeah,
like
I mean, there are evil practitioners too, right? But this does seem pretty grim for a non-diabolist. The last one I want to talk about was from Groby46578, who was talking about basically a practitioner who specializes in manipulating karma, to the extent that they can kind of swap karmic burdens around a bit and do all kinds of tricky things.
Yeah, which I mean, wouldn't Blake love to get his hands on someone like that?
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And I think that's probably my biggest issue with this, is it feels like too easy a fix for some really serious problems. Like, unless it was severely limited in some way. Yeah.
I like the idea. I do like the idea of it. I mean, I think we talked about this back when we first found out about karma and people who accrued positive karma and then just went around being really lucky. Like, I really like the idea of kind of luck-based karmic practitioning. But I think if you could do it to the extent that you swap Blake's karmic burden with, I don't know, someone who has a positive, with Isadora's karma, for example, which I assume is perfectly zero at all times, it feels OP. It feels like it would be a bit OP.
Yeah, it does remind me a little bit of like Corvidae.
Yeah,
and his thing of
good
like
John Piker.
Yeah, rearranging like connections. Like, I think what Groby was touching on is a kind of similar idea.
Yeah, it does give me some Corvidae vibes, but Corvidae I think Corvidae has a very interesting ability as well. Like the idea of basically making things belong to other people on a universal scale is a very interesting power. I think it would come with some really cool kind of tricks if we saw it used a bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's all the time we have to talk about the discussion thread. Thank you everybody who left us answers to our discussion questions. If you want to talk about the stuff that was in this chapter, any of the stuff we talked about, or hey, just anything at all that's Pact related, I guess, the best place to do that is in the discussion threads that we post every chapter. And the discussion thread for this episode will be linked in the show notes down below.
And if you want more information on when our next episode's coming out, or the next episode of any of the shows on the Doof Network, you can find that on our calendar on doofmedia.com.
Yes.
There's a button there to get to the calendar, and you'll be able to find out all about our upcoming schedule.
Yes. There will be some things on the Doof Media calendar that you won't be able to find out about, though. You'll see the calendar event, and you'll be like, hey, what's that? And you won't be able to know you won't be able to know unless you're a patron of Doof Media, because there's some really great perks that patrons get. To find out what those are, head to patreon.com/doofmedia. There's all kinds of cool things that people can get for backing the network at different levels. But the biggest perk that you get is just a high five and a hug from me if you see me, one per customer. Terms and conditions apply.
Yes, and of course, don't forget to think about patroning Wildbow as well, patreon.com/Wildbow.
Yes.
Because obviously none of this would exist without his brilliant mind.
Now, Elliot, will Wildbow give you a hug and a high five if you see him in person?
I really don't feel comfortable making that claim for him.
Correct. But that's all we have time for this chapter. Our next chapter, talking about Void 7.5, will be coming out on Monday the 10th, so we will see you all then.
See ya.
Bye.